In this edition of Low Code Feature Focus, we'll talk about how to save a grid selection directly to a form. We'll start by taking a look at a finished product. I have developed a form that asks for first name, last name, and email, and the presumption is that you would enter data directly here. But I've added a lookup user button that displays all of the users with usernames and emails, and if we select my name, it fills in the form directly. So this is perfect for an application where we look up information from another table, like a product table or a customer table, and insert that into sections of the form so that you can speed up data entry. This is a completed solution, but I'm going to build it from scratch. So we'll start by entering customization mode and adding a new page. So our page name is from scratch. So we're going to need three components. One is a form, one is a tab control, and one is a grid. You should have all these components loaded into your system before you start. I'm going to start with the grid. It's going to be a core building block to what we're going to need to do. So we drop a grid on the form. And it doesn't really matter where, because this will end up being hidden when we're done. So we'll manage the grid. And we're going to do a database table called users. And the fields we're going to pick out are user ID, first name and last name, and email address. And we'll submit that. Let it build our grid and save. It's a good programming practice to always name all of your modules. So we'll call this the user selection grid and update. And that will help later as we try to reference this grid. The second part of the puzzle is where you need to have an entry form. So I'm going to take a shortcut and load an action form onto the screen. And I am going to manage the form and use the contact form as a starting spot. Now, I don't really need all of the fields of the contact form, so I am going to remove the ones that I don't need. I'm going to use first name, last name, email, and I'm going to get rid of everything else. I'm going to leave the phone just as a purpose of a demonstration. So when we save that and go back, we can see that we have a basic form defined. So we'll keep working with that form. So we'll go back in and manage it again, and I'm going to put that in a new tab so that it's available quickly to use. First thing I'm going to do is call this my order entry form, so it gets a name. We'll come back in a minute and do a little bit more customization on this form. The next element that we're going to need is a Tabs Pro module. This is just a container to hold our user selection grid. And again, it doesn't matter where we drop it on the form because it's going to be hidden most of the time. Again, with good programming practice, I'll give this a name. I'm also going to get this manage grid open in another tab so that it's available to me to easily update. So let's configure the tab. So we'll do manage tab, full screen, and it's the user selection tab. We're going to do a couple of settings here. First of all, we're going to choose open as modal. That'll make sure that this form doesn't show up, this tab, it doesn't show up until it's called. Within the tabs, I'm going to add a new tab called User Selection. And inside that, I'm going to select the module for the User Selection Grid. So when this tab is displayed, we're going to see our User Selection Grid inside of it. And that should be it. So we'll save that. Next step is to go back to the order entry screen, and we're going to configure a button that's going to say lookup user. So we'll add a field. It's a button. It's going to be the lookup user button. And on here, we're going to add some actions. And the action that we're going to add is to open a Tabs Pro Popup and continue execution. It's just going to open the pop-up for us. So we'll pick the user selection tabs that we've already got defined, and we don't need to pass it anything extra. We're just going to open that up, and we'll save that. So let's see where we are so far. If we go to our screen and refresh, let's see the differences. First of all, on our form, we see that there is a lookup user button, and the tab doesn't really show. We're in edit mode, so we can see that it's there, and the grid has disappeared. That's because it's under the control now of this tab. So if we click lookup user, we see that all these fields are required, and that's not really behavior that we want. So we'll clear that up. I'm going to go to the lookup user tab and uncheck that this causes validation. We don't need this lookup button to cause any validation. So we'll come back here and refresh and try again. Now that it doesn't cause validation, it allows us, it doesn't stop us, but for some reason it didn't open the form that we needed it to open. So let's see what's going on with that. Okay, when we click lookup user and it appears like nothing's happening, I think the issue is that I've used the open Tabs Pro Popup and continue execution, so it's continuing to work. I think that's the wrong type, so I'm going to try again. So I'm going to delete that out and instead choose the open Tabs Pro and stop execution. That way the form will pop up and stay open. So we'll select our user tabs. Still no other parameters necessary. We'll save that, refresh, and see if we get a better result. Now when I click lookup user, the screen pops up and I have nothing, no actions built in yet, but we can at least see that our users are popping up. So I'm going to close that and we'll continue with our development. The next step in our process is going to be to add onto our user selection a button that says select. And when we click the select button, it will transmit the information back to our form. So we go into our user selection grid. We'll add an item button, one item that will appear on each button, on each row. And we'll call this button, we'll call it select. I like to give it an icon. So we'll pick that, we'll put a checkbox next to it. That'll say that that's the one we want. It'll help define it. I am actually going to add an action. It is a JavaScript action, and we're going to add a JavaScript action and continue execution. And I'm just going to put a brief snippet of JavaScript in here. Say it worked. And we'll add another item, another action to the select. It's going to be called a close. We're going to close the Tabs Pro Popup and continue execution. So the one we're going to close is the user selection tab. So far all we've done, when somebody clicks this select button, it's going to pop up just a quick little alert to let us know that we've got our JavaScript code working, and then it's going to close down the form. So let's see, we'll save that and see what we've got so far. So we look up the user. We now have a select button with a checkbox. We pick one. We get a pop-up that says it worked. And then when we hit OK, the screen goes away. So we have all the pieces working except the part where the names that we select, the information that we select should appear in these fields. So let's see what we can do about making that happen. In this particular step, we need to know the module ID of this module. And there's a couple of ways to get a hold of that. The order entry form module ID, you can see it here in the URL. It's 461. So we can use that module ID. There's other ways to get it by inspecting, for example. You can right click and inspect and look to see at the resulting code what it is. But from here, we can see that it's module ID 461. So we'll use that in a minute. So now we go back to our button and we enhance the button. We're going to look at the JavaScript code and we're going to add JavaScript code. Instead of saying it worked, we're actually going to do the work of pushing the field information out of the grid and into the form. So we have some, I have some JavaScript, and you're going to see this in the comments to this video, but we'll build this up bit by bit. So first of all, we need a JavaScript variable 461. So it looks like this, DNN 461 root with a hashtag in front of it. That's saying that's the module number. And then we are going to add some JavaScript. And again, it's useful to copy and paste because this is a formula that's already working. What this says is that we're going to set the module 461 first name field. That's however you named the field. In this case, it was named first name. And we're going to put the first name value token, which comes from the row that we're looking at. So it's going to be this field, first name. It appears as a token. So we say that the form field equals first name. And then we're going to do the same thing for last name and email address. And then finally, we want that to appear on the screen. So we have to use this special one that says apply. So now the form fields will be redrawn with these new values. And that's it. We've taken values. Any value you have from the grid, you can paste into the form. Just have to get the field names and field tokens correct. So we save that and go back to our grid and our form and refresh. And let's see it work. So we say we want to look up the user and we pick one of these and say select. And notice that the first name, last name, email field has been filled in. The phone number field is blank because we didn't push anything to it. We can change that again. For example, if we want to pick the super user account, we can select that, and those fields get pushed in here. Now, these fields exist on the form. They're not saved, and you can do anything you would normally do with the fields. They're just stored on the form in that instance in the browser. And so you would typically have a save button to go on and save that form for your other purposes. Okay, so we've had three components: a form to receive the data, a grid to let you do lookup and selection of the data, and we used a Tabs Pro module just to hide the grid until we needed it. We added actions to the lookup user button to bring up the grid, and we added a couple of actions to the user selection grid to allow those selections to push onto the form and to close the grid. It's an interesting use case, and we built this demonstration specifically to help a customer, but we're glad to publish it so that others can benefit. In this low-code feature focus, we saved a grid selection to form fields so that they can be used for other purposes, and it was done without doing a round trip to the server. Is there some other feature you'd like to see in our next video? Leave a comment in the comment section below. For more great low-code content, be sure to subscribe to Plant an App. This is Dale Warner with your low-code feature focus.